And the only way you can do it is to feel you have to. You have to. You don't have an option. You have to. Stand up, speak up, act up.
There are actors who dazzle with brilliance. And then there is Meryl Streep, a singular force in modern cinema. In an industry where reinvention is currency and image is everything, Streep's legacy stands untouched. Over 5 decades of critically acclaimed performances, dozens of prestigious awards, and a standard of excellence that few have even approached. Her career isn't just long. It's deliberate, intricate, and defined by choice. Who she works with, who she speaks highly of, and who she pointedly never collaborates with again. These are subtle, sometimes silent signals in the rarefied world she occupies. Yet, in an age of viral headlines and exaggerated outrage, social media has capitalized on even the faintest friction. Clickbait titles often allege she hated certain actors. But what's the truth behind these rumors? Today, we're looking at the whispers, the rivalries, the uncomfortable partnerships, and whether any of them come close to real animosity. So let's explore the 6 most talked about names linked to Meryl Streep's supposed disdain. In the world of film, the image crafted on screen often hides the layers of complexity unfolding behind the scenes. With Meryl Streep, widely regarded as one of the most accomplished actors of her generation, there have been moments where the craft collided with controversy, artistry clashed with ego, and quiet refusals spoke louder than any headline. 2 such stories stand apart: the clash of methods on Kramer versus Kramer, and the unspoken judgment from a golden age icon. When Kramer vs. Kramer was released in 1979, its emotional weight struck a deep chord with audiences. The film's raw portrayal of divorce and custody made it one of the decade's most affecting dramas. At its heart were 2 powerhouse performances: Streep's nuanced portrayal of a conflicted mother and Dustin Hoffman's transformation into a father rediscovering his son. The performances were so visceral, so emotionally precise, that it seemed impossible they weren't rooted in genuine, lived tension. But that tension, as it turned out, extended well beyond the script. Reports later revealed a darker side to the film's production. Dustin Hoffman, known for immersing himself into roles, took his method approach to alarming extremes. During filming, he is said to have slapped Streep without warning and thrown a wine glass in her direction, unprompted and unrehearsed. These weren't scripted moves. They were Hoffman's idea of provoking a performance. Worse, he reportedly brought up deeply personal topics, including Streep's grief over the recent loss of her fiancé, John Cazale, in an effort to get a more emotional reaction from her on set. Years later, Streep acknowledged these incidents, describing Hoffman's actions as overstepping. She made it clear that she did not condone this kind of behavior under the guise of artistic commitment. While she did not return the aggression, nor did she dwell on it publicly for years, her words reflected a profound discomfort and disapproval. The trust was broken. She and Hoffman never collaborated again. What's particularly telling is how the story shifted over time. Initially discussed in hushed tones or sidestepped altogether, the truth of the production atmosphere became clearer as conversations about professionalism and consent in the workplace grew louder. Today, This episode is no longer seen simply as behind-the-scenes trivia, but as part of a broader reckoning with power, boundaries, and respect in the industry. In contrast to this combustible experience was another clash, one that played out without a single shared scene or moment of confrontation. It came not through a verdict, a quiet but cutting critique from one legend to another. Katharine Hepburn, the towering force of old Hollywood, held nothing back in her opinions. She once remarked, in a comment reported by biographer A. Scott Berg, that Meryl Streep was her least favorite modern actress. The reason? Hepburn found her acting too deliberate, too visible. "She's acting all the time," she reportedly said. For Hepburn, who championed a natural, spontaneous style, Streep's chameleon-like transformations seemed foreign, perhaps even artificial. It wasn't envy, exactly. Hepburn had long since secured her place in cinematic history. But her critique reflected something deeper. A discomfort with the changing tides of acting, with a younger generation's embrace of versatility and immersion over personality and charisma. Hepburn's style had been built on presence, on walking into a scene and owning it without ever disappearing into a role. Streep, on the other hand, built her reputation on becoming unrecognizable, vanishing into character after character with uncanny precision. Streep never responded directly to Hepburn's remarks. There was no rebuttal, no attempt to defend her craft. She held her silence, which in itself was a kind of grace. The two never worked together, and perhaps never could have. Their approaches were too distinct, their visions of what it meant to act, rooted in entirely different eras and ideologies. And yet, the absence of open conflict doesn't make this standoff any less compelling. In some ways, it's more intriguing than a public feud. Hepburn's words echoed through interviews and biographies, and Streep's silence only reinforced the contrast between them. Two towering figures divided not by personal animosity, but by incompatible philosophies. What links both of these stories, the volatile collaboration with Hoffman and the silent disapproval from Hepburn, is a deeper conversation about the demands and definitions of acting. For some, like Hoffman, the pursuit of authenticity can blur into abuse. For others, like Hepburn, authenticity must come effortlessly, without visible labor. In both cases, Streep stood her ground, not loudly, not defensively, but by continuing to do the work in her own way. Her career never stalled. Her performances remained layered, cerebral, and emotionally rich. She kept transforming, kept choosing roles that defied expectation, and kept building a legacy on her own terms. The dissonance, the criticism, the clashes, none of it stopped her. If anything, it sharpened her commitment to a craft that never needed anyone's approval to be extraordinary. These stories linger not because they were dramatic, but because they show how much can be at stake in the quiet corners of a career. When the curtain falls and the cameras stop, it's these moments of resistance, restraint, and resolve that reveal the heart of a performer. When Susan Sarandon voiced her frustrations about Meryl Streep getting first crack at all the women's roles, it didn't take long for the industry to react. While some saw the statement as a direct challenge, others recognized it as a reflection of a broader issue. The remark wasn't just about two actors, It was about the persistent scarcity of opportunities available to women in film, especially those who have passed a certain age. Streep's presence in Hollywood has long been a towering one. With each critically acclaimed role, her name rose higher in the unofficial hierarchy of casting decisions. Directors, producers, and screenwriters have often viewed her as a default choice for dramatic, layered, older female characters. Sarandon's comment pointed to that imbalance. It wasn't a personal attack, but rather a commentary on how the industry funnels prestige roles through a narrow gate, one that often opens first, and sometimes only, for Meryl Streep. For actresses like Sarandon, who also carry an impressive body of work and decades of industry experience, the system itself can feel unfair. The frustration wasn't about rivalry. It was about being overlooked in favor of someone the industry had deemed its standard. The conversation might have been interpreted by some as professional envy, but what lay beneath it was a recognition of a deeply flawed structure. Streep didn't retaliate or publicly address the statement. Instead, she maintained the posture she has consistently taken in similar situations: silent acknowledgement of her influence, paired with an openness to structural critique. In past interviews, she's recognized that casting often begins with her name, even expressing discomfort with that reality. She's called for more original writing for women, more diverse casting, and more opportunities for others who deserve the same visibility. There was no feud. There didn't need to be. The moment passed without confrontation, but it marked a quiet acknowledgement of the pressure that success can impose, not just on the person who receives the roles, but on those equally qualified and sidelined. The tension between Sarandon and Streep never escalated, but the underlying issue they represented remains a topic of ongoing relevance. Then came another moment that drew attention, this time involving Sharon Stone. A resurfaced interview quote caused immediate backlash online. Stone had said, "You didn't have to be pretty to be a great actress. Look at Meryl Streep." The comment circulated widely and was quickly interpreted as a jab, a backhanded critique veiled as commentary. Stone later clarified that her intention had been to challenge conventional beauty standards in Hollywood. Her argument was that true acting talent shouldn't be linked to physical appearance. However, the phrasing led to a flurry of criticism. For many, it appeared that she had reduced Streep's success to a lack of traditional glamour, creating a narrative that implied criticism rather than insight. Meryl Streep never responded. No statement, no press interview, no public comment. That silence became a kind of statement on its own. In an industry where public feuds are often fueled by responses, non-engagement becomes a refusal to participate in the spectacle. Whether Streep was offended, amused, or indifferent, she let the moment pass without validation. It's possible that Streep understood what Stone was trying to say, even if it was delivered awkwardly. The entertainment industry has long used beauty as both a requirement and a weapon. Many actresses have found themselves typecast, passed over, or objectified based on how closely they fit or defied a certain ideal. Stone's comment, "If one strips away the clumsy wording," may have been an attempt to highlight how Streep's career defied that limiting formula, how she rose to prominence on skill alone, not on image. Still, intention doesn't always erase impact. The conversation took on a life of its own. Fans of Streep defended her fiercely. Others dissected Stone's words, pointing to broader conversations about beauty, age, and success in the film world. What remained at the center of it all was Streep, unshaken and quiet, her career continuing without interruption. These two moments, Sarandon's open frustration and Stone's controversial remark, reflect the complicated position that Streep holds within the industry. Her work is rarely challenged. Her skill is almost universally respected. But with such status comes inevitable scrutiny. Some see her as the beneficiary of a system that limits others. Some see her as an example of how far a woman can go without conforming to Hollywood's usual standards. And some, like Stone, struggle to articulate their observations without misstep. What ties both stories together is the space between intention and perception. Neither Sarandon nor Stone launched a direct attack. Their comments, though charged, were aimed more at the system than at the individual. But because that individual is Meryl Streep, because she represents something larger than herself, the reactions were swift and emotional. Streep's approach throughout has remained consistent. She does not reply with public statements. She does not offer clarifications or counterpoints. Instead, she chooses not to amplify the commentary at all. Whether this is strategic or simply a reflection of her disposition is unclear, but the result is unmistakable. The conversations continue without her participation. And perhaps that's the real story. Not feuds or rivalries, but the way one artist's success can reflect so many different things to so many different people. For some, it's inspiration. For others, it's a barrier. For a few, it's a complicated mixture of admiration and frustration. In all of it, Streep remains silent, steady, and undeniably present. Meryl Streep has never needed to engage in public confrontation to make her stance clear. In her world, disapproval isn't loud. It's measured, often invisible to the public eye, but unmistakable to those paying attention. The absence of repeat collaborations, the quiet distance from certain actors, and the carefully worded comments reveal more than a headline ever could. Gwyneth Paltrow is one of the names often placed adjacent to Streep in conversations about generational shifts in Hollywood. Paltrow has achieved significant success, won an Oscar early in her career, and built a global lifestyle brand. Her career has combined acting with commercial ventures, shifting from performance to personality in a way that defined a certain era. Streep's work, by contrast, has remained deeply rooted in transformation, character study, and long-term artistic discipline. In several interviews over the years, Streep has spoken about the evolving standards within the acting profession. She mentioned the blurring of celebrity and artistry, pointing to the diminishing standard of what constitutes an actress. Though no names were attached, observers quickly drew connections to high-profile figures like Paltrow, whose public persona sometimes eclipsed her film work. Actress Paltrow, for her part, has only ever spoken respectfully about Streep. She called her the greatest actress of our time and, and credited her with raising the bar for everyone else. But praise doesn't always lead to reciprocity. Streep has never publicly acknowledged those compliments and, more notably, has never collaborated with Paltrow, not even in ensemble projects where their paths might have crossed. This absence became its own message. No critique, no approval, just distance. That kind of quiet separation isn't unique to Paltrow. A more revealing pattern appears when looking at some of the major male actors who only worked with Streep once. Clint Eastwood, Jack Nicholson, and Gene Hackman, all widely respected, all paired with her for high-profile projects, and yet, never again. The story with Eastwood during the filming of The Bridges of Madison County is often revisited by those familiar with their working styles. Eastwood's minimalist direction and terse on-set demeanor stood in contrast to Streep's methodical and emotionally immersive process. Though the film found success, it marked the beginning and end of their collaboration. Not due to scandal or fallout, but because the alignment was never comfortable. Similarly, Gene Hackman was described as intense and sometimes abrasive while filming The French Lieutenant's Woman. Streep, known for her calm focus and preparation, remained professional. But they never shared the screen again. No statement ever explained why. It simply didn't happen. Even Jack Nicholson, who starred with her in Heartburn, was a one-time co-star. Their dynamic on-screen was compelling, but behind the scenes, their differences in working rhythm reportedly created tension. Again, no headlines followed, just the unmistakable silence of a door not reopened. Meryl Streep doesn't reject people in the traditional sense. She doesn't argue, accuse, or respond in interviews. Instead, she selects. She chooses not to return, not to repeat, not to invite. In an industry where so much depends on public perception, that level of control is rare. It isn't passive-aggressive. It's calculated, and it works. In the entertainment industry, words often lose their weight. Speculation fills in the blanks where silence exists, and absence is interpreted as conflict. When it comes to Meryl Streep, this pattern has repeated over decades. She doesn't engage in personal attacks, doesn't participate in headline-driven feuds, and avoids reducing complex situations to simple emotions. That doesn't mean she accepts everything around her. It means she chooses when and how to respond, and more often, when not to. The word hatred is too easy. It simplifies what are, in most cases, professional decisions based on principle, standards, or quiet refusal. Streep has never been a reactive figure. If she found a colleague's behavior unprofessional or their values incompatible, she simply moved on. No public fallout, no lingering commentary, just a line drawn in her choices. This approach unsettles a culture that demands spectacle. In a space where conflict fuels visibility, her restraint becomes a powerful form of control. The narrative around her becomes shaped not by scandal, but by absence. She has been known to distance herself from certain individuals or environments without labeling it, without explaining. That restraint, though often misread, reveals more than a confrontation ever could. In Streep's world, what is labeled as hatred is more often the decision not to reward poor behavior, not to normalize chaos, and not to invest time in unworthy dynamics. Her silence isn't passive, it's selective. And that, in Hollywood, is its own language. So, did Meryl Streep really hate these 6 actors? Probably not in the way the tabloids or thumbnails suggest. But did she draw boundaries? Absolutely. In an industry where silence is strategy, her decisions speak louder than interviews ever could. When you see someone with a possession of origins, understand this. Every role she took, and every one she turned down was a conscious choice. Not out of spite, but out of principle. And sometimes, that principle meant walking away from talent she couldn't respect, or behavior she wouldn't tolerate. Now, we want to hear from you. Which of these stories surprised you the most? Have you ever noticed the patterns in her career before today? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this dive into one of cinema's most complex icons, hit that like button. Subscribe for more deep dives into Hollywood's unspoken truths, and ring the bell so you never miss an upload. Until next time, stay curious, stay sharp,